Hello, welcome to the Realm of Ideas. It's Free Tall and it's real. Episode 84. This is Technique as Generator. What it can offer us for our new work. So, ruminations we do once a week. We had a preview on Wednesday at 10:30, and we have our regular program, which is now. We have been experiencing some technical difficulties. We had a horrible time on Thursday. We were basically 2 hours late, I believe. And then today we basically maybe we're like 15 minutes late. But the point is, I don't know what it is. It just seems that like once you get something to be successful, things just drop out of the sky on you. I mean, and success, I mean, Julie has done a fantastic job. We are now approaching 425 subscriptions, and we soon will be at 500, which is something I never dreamed possible. When I started doing this, it was just something I did, and I never actually thought that we would get to the point where I would be able to kind of say like, oh, there's people who actually know about what we're doing here, and there's people who are actually watching and caring and kind of like being involved. And it's been incredibly satisfying and cheering. I mean, I know that ideas, as much as people profess an interest in intellect, and as much as I find that there's a great insecurity in people who do not feel as if they're adequately intelligent enough, there isn't really an attempt to really focus on changing that reality within oneself. So I'm not really surprised that I see that things that deal with ideas are not basically gotten a lot of attention. So anyway, technique as generator. It's something we've talked about in the past. It's the idea that as things come to a certain point. Hello, that's Julie. At a certain point, there's the reality where the technique itself. Yes, the technique itself becomes that which we can kind of look to as inspiration. Now, as I kind of feel that we are entering a new age, I feel as if those pieces and people who are starting to kind of generate those things will be able to point us in that direction. Mm-hmm. I see ourselves as kind of part of that. Anyway, as a result, let's say a quick word. Thank you, Tease Tea, our sponsor. You guys are the greatest. Always enjoy kind of conversing back and forth and kind of giving updates and getting updates on all the new things that are happening. So it's definitely appreciated.
And we found the perfect combination to eat with our Tease Tea.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Which is 77%. Not 70, not 80. This is the Goldilocks zone in terms of both health and gastronomic wonderfulness, mm-hmm. Which is 77% cacao is the sweet spot, is the Goldilocks spot, and it goes extremely well with both the mint and the jet.
Okay. All right. Do you want to say something? We're going to kind of read this piece. And then
why don't you start reading?
All right. Okay. So one of the things that we talked about principles, we talked about abstractions recently, and I kind of like came across one of my favorite books from maybe my favorite author, Alfred North Whitehead, Introduction to Mathematics. I was remember reading this before and never really penetrating this book very deeply.
And boy, is this hard to find.
If
anyone ever sees a copy, grab it.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting book because I think what happens is, Whitehead wants to make sure people understand there's a difference between the technical facility of mathematics and understanding the principles of mathematics. So I'm going to read something when he talks about the idea of the abstract nature of mathematics. Consider how all events are interconnected. When we see the lightning, we listen for the thunder. When we hear the wind, we look for the waves on the sea. In the chill afternoon, the leaves fall. Everywhere order reigns. So when some circumstances have been noted, we can foresee that others will also be present. The progress of science consists of observing these interconnections and in showing what a patient ingenuity that the events of the ever-shifting world are but examples of a few general connections or relations called laws. To see what is general is what is particular, and what is permanent and what is transitory is the aim of scientific thought. In the eye of science, the fall of an apple, the motion of a planet around a sun, and the clinging of the atmosphere to the earth are all seen as examples of the law of gravity. This possibility of disentangling the most complex evanescent circumstances into various examples of permanent laws is the controlling idea of modern thought. Now, let us think to the sort of laws which we want in order completely to realize this scientific ideal. Our knowledge of the particular facts of the world around us is gained from our sensations. We see and hear and taste and smell and feel hot and cold and push and pull and ache and tingle. These are just our own personal sensations. My toothache cannot be your toothache, and my sight cannot be your sight. But we ascribe the origin of these sensations to relations between the things which form the external world. Okay, this is key. Thus, the dentist extracts not the toothache, but the tooth. And not only so, he also endeavored to imagine the world as one interconnected set of things, which underlies all the perceptions of all people. There is not one world of things for my sensations and another one for yours, but one world in which we both exist. It is the same tooth both for the dentist and the patient. Also, we hear, we touch the same world as we see.
That's a really beautiful passage.
I love that passage because I think I was kind of looking for it. And I was like, I was looking all over, and it was funny because I found it right at the beginning of the book. And I think what's interesting is what it talks about, and this is what I think is a problem for us, is that we have lost sight of the principles. We take them for granted. As a result, since we're unaware or somewhat ignorant of them, we stumble over the premises of what's important to us. I think that's what has become the advantage of the detritus, is that they kind of advance as a result of these things that they see as vulnerable, because we, out of our ignorance or our laziness, have taken the principles for granted and have lost the sense of their importance. However, without that, these things become vulnerable. Anyway, that said, go ahead. And then I was going to say this is what's new in Julie, but let's go ahead. Go ahead.
I would like to first say a big hello and send our Warm Art Science Complex greetings to our many new, very enthusiastic friends and colleagues at MAD, the Museum of Art and Design here in New York City. In their own beautiful 9-story building at Columbus Circle. I had a wonderful welcoming experience there from everybody on Thursday. And thanks to our very enthusiastic new subscribers, a mathematician, a theater designer, 2 artists, filmmakers, just a terrific thing. And in keeping with the theme of our podcast now on technique as driver, there are 2 exhibitions there I would like to highly recommend, where at the bow that is steering these 2 ships is a studied and meticulous, in one case classical, in one case more experimental technique. And very, very quickly, the first is Alice Reel's Porcelain Florilegium, which is a gorgeous exhibition of a living French artist who trained at Sèvres.
Oh.
Yeah, very, very, very impressive, and makes these beautiful, delicate, meticulous porcelain plant wall murals. And they're put together like a jigsaw, but there are films there on Alice Reel's process, and it is very much in the tradition of classical painting and sculpting. She actually hand draws all of her designs on the floor on giant sheets of paper, then sculpts them in clay with very traditional tools, and even adds the detail onto the leaves of plants, which she studies and collects like a true observer of the natural world. So, I mean, her process is specimen gathering, then research, then her direct observation of nature, and hand drawing, sculpting, firing, glazing, assembling. Very, very impressive. The second exhibition there is whimsical, comical, monstrously fanciful. It's called Haas Brothers Uncanny Valley. And they actually use something called accretions and talk about it as being inspired by the sedimentary accretion process in geology. And they do, and they actually make three-dimensional. Well, it's not, as they say in the Big Bang. It's a soft science.
It's
But
in there.
I mean,
like,
yeah,
it's, just not,
it's in there. It's a life
it's kind of
science.
like,
yeah.
it's like ornithology and entomology. You can't say that.
Well, no.
We have a lot of entomology.
We have a lot of entomologist friends.
I didn't
okay.
say that.
And
Sorry.
interestingly, their process, while not my process and not ours, is these are twins. These are actually twin brothers, not identical twins, or fraternal, who actually use a lot of computer software, something called Blender, which actually is a mimic of the way organic life moves and contorts. Now, I personally do not use that. I study life directly. That's my preference. But they've built some really astonishing things called Zoids, which is a really fun name. And I mean, these pieces are huge and they basically look like, 1950s and 60s fun science fiction models.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
I would like to
I'd
tell
love to see
people,
them.
I think people would really
Did you
enjoy
take
these.
pictures?
Yes, I have a lot of photos. So yeah, so yes, that's a terrific place. So yes,
that reminds me of kind of two things. Is
Mhm.
like one of the things is the fact that again, I keep going back to this, the Century of Genius and Whitehead's, kind of like history of science, and I mean history of the modern world,
Mhm.
and like he talks about the fact that there was a point where that Leonardo was the example in the Century of Genius of just that naturalistic study of the artist, that sense of kind of investigation simply to kind of get a sense of what things were so that they were understood. And it's interesting, this idea of these things that kind of expand and expand and expand. We were at the Metropolitan Museum, and if you haven't seen it, if you have the opportunity to get to see the Gothic show, the Gothic architecture show, it's brilliant. And I think one of the things that happens a lot of times is that the individual designers would see a certain detail and start to understand a certain part, and then kind of have to add paper and here as they kind of got a better and kind of like more complete understanding. But it was always, it seemed like as if that sense of kind of just like searching around in the dark, just trying to get a glimpse of what things were, which is kind of like something that I've always enjoyed. I love that idea of kind of searching around in the dark and coming across things and kind of like enjoying those beautiful discoveries of, oh, what's this? Oh, this is beautiful. Let's look at that.
Like the Snuffler.
Yeah. I think that
people are not aware who the Snuffler is.
No, it's like I think that idea that you come across things and you just kind of like see the fact that you're out there just enjoying the makeup of the things as they are, and then kind of making these kind of beautiful discoveries. Ever since I was a boy and I kind of looked at Leonardo's notebooks for the first time, that was always kind of the way in which I kind of came across this idea of the fact that, again, I've talked about this many times. A lot of times we see the idea of kind of science as the eureka moment. It's like, I found it. I've discovered what we've been looking for.
That's not how real science works.
It could be in certain times. I mean, I think sometimes people have a sense that things are out there and they find them. There was like the Darwin moth that basically he suspected that there had to be a moth with a proboscis that was capable
that actually matched a flower with the long fluted structure.
But in the case where I love that investigation, it's like, oh, what's this? That idea that you found something that has this kind of inkling of kind of consequence and value, and you just love the idea of looking forward to kind of finding what that is. In a way,
Yeah.
that's the secret. That's the secret behind the principle of organic design thinking, which was the idea that I don't want to kind of like define things. I want to basically kind of like uh, understand and reveal the essence of things through their kind of being somewhat provocative.
Well, I want to grow, brew, and ferment things.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
cool.
a quick word on Darwin's moth. That's what I would call a proto-hypothesis. And by that, I mean that the hypothesis on Darwin's part was a brilliant intellectual stroke, precisely because there are, how should I say, two entities who have a very close symbiotic existence. One has yet to be discovered, and the other is well known. So his hypothesis is that even though no one has seen that moth yet,
right, it has to exist.
That it has to actually exist in the world, because this particular flower is such a challenge for a pollinator that very few other pollinators, none, it turns out, are actually equipped to pollinate it.
But given the fact that pollination is a given, it has to exist.
Well,
it's kind of like, you kind of like, there's a piece to fit the puzzle. You just happily simply and find. I think that's one of the things that Whitehead is talking about in that piece from Introduction to Mathematics, is the fact that there is an interconnectedness, and there are rules and there are laws by which these principles exist. But the question is, can you understand and appreciate them? And as they shift through process, investigations lead to the potentials for new beginnings. And I think in this case, that's kind of the fact. That's kind of where we are now. So looking at what are the possibilities to uncover and that new potential, I go back to the idea of technique. And I think there's a difference between facility and technique. I think
this is a very key point.
I think that in the case of an individual, right, an individual can be incredibly facile. But the point is that facility is not leading to any certain discovery. One of the things that, again, in the Introduction to Mathematics, Whitehead's talking about the fact that there are abstractions that are of consequence, like the idea of when he's talking about variables, where there are some things as related to all things, and that variables can be investigated and kind of to parse out these two different things. So those abstract principles that kind of allow us opportunities for new spaces to be investigated, those can come from the technique. But if you become overly facile, you just end up kind of like just solving problems and never understanding the potential abstractions that lie behind the curtain.
Okay. Should I launch it?
Launch my puddle.
Okay. I'm going to launch.
We didn't do it this week in June.
Oh, well,
maybe we shouldn't. We can do it.
Well,
show the drawing because it's so beautiful.
Okay, I just want to. I will show it
because we're like 20 minutes in, but at a certain point, how the Monty Python sketches sometimes they would do the intro at the end.
Yes,
or they would kind of like have this long thing. It's like, has the program started yet?
Yes, and then they play the titles because Monty Python were a genius bunch. Anyway, I would like to launch into this. I do have a lot to cover here.
Are we going to do this weekend, Julie?
Yes.
Okay.
We are after I launch into the segue.
Yes, launch puddle.
I'd like to elucidate some of the differences between, as Bruce said, between one's facility and one's innovative ability to craft and create a technique that is wholly novel, that is wholly theirs. And there are a number of people who can train themselves. I mean, it does take a lot of work and the diligence. They can train themselves to be incredibly facile, but they never end up inventing or innovating much of anything, so that facility doesn't progress to something really exciting. So I would like to talk about, and after this, I'll show the drawing
Okay.
that I did. I would like to talk about Lottie Reiniger,
Mhm.
who is the perfect example. There were many early animators who were extremely facile. Max Fleischer was marvelous, and I love old Max Fleischer, the Betty Boop, and they had some wonderful uncut, very racy early Betty Boops a couple months ago at Film Forum,
Mhm.
and they're incredible. They didn't really pioneer a whole lot in technique, but they were incredibly well done at the time. But Lottie Reiniger, who fortunately lived for a very, very long time, was a silhouette paper animator, which is something entirely different. She was German, lived from 1899 to 1981, and made over 40 films.
Nice.
That's 40, most of which were lost when she fled Europe from the Nazis, and ended up doing most of her incredibly innovative work hiding out in her colleague's attic for years. So, I mean, talk about working under the most dire of circumstances and not just surviving. And this is key, not just thriving, but innovating, inventing, and thriving in the most oppressive, dire, life threatening circumstances. Anyway, hers is the earliest full feature length animated film to survive to this day.
Interesting.
And we know it, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed.
Which actually is I guess celebrating its centennial.
Yes, it was 1926.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, what did Lottie Reiniger invent? Quite a lot. She invented something called a proto multiplane camera. Now, this was, of course, pre digital animation. What this does is it gives flat, two-dimensional silhouette animated shadow puppets the illusion of distance and depth. So it's depth of field. And if you watch her film, and I recommend this to everyone, it's on disc, it's on CD, it's on DVD, probably on a Blu-ray. They do show clips occasionally on the wonderful show Classic Arts.
It's on YouTube.
Showcase. Oh, okay. You can go on YouTube and watch it. Okay, so what this is her technique. What she invented are stacked backlit planes of glass, and it's huge. I have a photo of it that I'll show. In her custom trick table, there's a long German word for it. This is a technique that predated by a decade the multi-plane systems used by Walt Disney in 1930s. So she invented this way before him. So she also invented complex stop motion animation artistry on a level that had never been seen. This film to this day is an elegant, sophisticated masterwork, in this case, a mistress work. She eschewed what was in vogue. Now, this is also key. When someone is an innovator, they will eschew what the norms and conventions and standards of the day, and their technique will supersede what is commonly accepted. So in this case, the animation of the day was centered on slapstick. That was the primary driver. And it's really funny. There is nothing wrong, but it's not terribly sophisticated. That's what was going on in the early 1920s animation. So Lottie favored very sophisticated tales, classical music, literate narratives, and image fantasy of and operatic tales. I mean, she did the Brothers
She did
Grimm.
the Goblin.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we got to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God, that'd be epic.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
And I'll just say 3 more quick things. Her puppets were hinged at the joints and weighted with lead. Why is this a technical innovation on a grand scale? It gave them a lifelike kind of a movement. And
Yeah,
if you
because they have a
watch,
gravity.
oh yeah,
That's an
their
innovation.
fingers and their
Yes.
toes moved as a human being, and they very, very much seem alive. They are
That
very,
makes sense.
very fluid. They are very articulate. They have complex human joints, and the backgrounds. This is really key.
I have complex human joints.
Oh yeah, you also have complex human joints. See, look, same. I'm a shadow puppet. He's a shadow puppet.
I am a shadow puppet.
Yes. So these were strata of translucent gels, paper, and textures that actually gave, and acetate foils that were previously unknown in animation. So, and her work was called, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right. I don't speak German. Of course, I'm fluent in Japanese, French, Farsi, and Hindu, but my German isn't quite up.
When did that happen?
I don't know. It's Scherenschnitt, which is called scissor cuts in German. And these are metamorphic innovations. Sorry, that was long, but she accomplished a lot. And it's incredibly important work.
Very key.
Very key to what we are talking about.
I think so.
Oh yeah. I can't think of a better example.
Because I think what happens is like certain possibilities exist at a time where you start to see from the techniques the opportunities to make things that kind of have a compelling nature. We talked about the fact that the institutions have a value in the fact that they can hold on to the principles of a time and extend them and kind of make, valuable innovations. But at a certain point, they're not going to be the place from which you're going to find genius. These are caretakers. And I think that's one of the reasons why also I think that Mr. Spock's idea of, and it's real, means that in the course of, things outside of the academic realm, in the public square, which is away from the kind of like rarefied environments, is that we actually see those situations where we understand that the technique is something that needs freedom, needs to be emancipated in order for you to kind of like get to the point where you're starting to kind of see, in fact, that thing which it's meant to be. We have a friend who's a cellist, very gifted cellist.
Yes.
And I kind of find that what I see in her work is what I would call adjacent sounds. And I think in this case, I should talk to her about it. But I think the idea is that like what I see is the fact that they're not just the sounds that are made, but there's a certain kind of specific adjacent circumstance that seems to kind of play into the generation of her work. So I think that like that's kind of part and parcel of the fact that at a certain point, the artists become, as we've said before, they become dissatisfied with the kind of formulations that are given them in the institutions, because the principles that have been laid down, the ones were ones that were once valuable and ones of consequence, have kind of no longer been able to keep up with the times. So as the times shift to a kind of like different circumstance, these things either need to be reformed or discarded. So we'll talk about this next week, in the fact that next week's project is called The New Era, Things to Come, which was also kind of like a reference to that great movie with Raymond Massey, which I absolutely love.
What a chilling, prophetic,
but the idea is what are those things that give rise to the new age? What are those things that we kind of see that kind of make these formulations from the past become kind of obsolete or no longer viable? Which tools are no longer able to kind of be able to build upon the scaffold of the reality of the time?
I call them vanishing tools.
Yes, we're going to have that, which is a future show. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I mean, that is something. So,
okay,
now, what's new in Julie?
Oh, quite
this week,
quite a lot, as it seems. So Bruce is kindly holding up my finished science
Here we are
drawing.
mid-show.
Yes, mid-show, very exciting. We're shaking things up. Usually we do this about 4 to 5 minutes into our podcast, but because we had a technical thing and we started late, we're just going to shake things up.
Mhm.
And yes, so I finished and signed this drawing yesterday at the Met, and I was working in the Japanese wing because the Chinese treasury is still closed on the 3rd floor. But there are 2 Chinese antiquities, the cloisonne pieces here and here, and I will explain. The title of my finished drawing here is Nightfall of Grondwittloof. And yes, it's not Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings. It's Grondwittloof, which actually means white gold, queen of white endives, as in Belgian endives. Yes, the vegetable, the amazing vegetable with a bizarre forced 2-year growing cycle that is imposed on them by the farmers, which is utterly absurd and produces a very delicious, if tormented, soul. Because why are Belgian endives white? This is a plant science drawing. That's what my piece is. They are white because they are denied the ability to photosynthesize, and they are barred from making chlorophyll from the sun because they are forced to sprout in the dark. A year after they were grown, the process really quickly, since we got a late start, is they're planted in the ground. They sprout these beautiful green leafy heads, and they're all decapitated, a la French Revolutionary style. It's kind of gruesome. They shoot down these hugely long, several meter long for our European friends, a couple of feet long for our American friends. We span the continents here at Art Science Complex.
Mm-hmm.
And the tap roots are then spirited inside, and they build these shallow wooden beds, blanket them, block out the sun, often putting sheets of metal over them. And in a year's time, they are forced to sprout in the dark, where they grow. If you can just bring it really close to the screen. Yes, great. Perfect. Where they grow, maybe just, yes, where they grow these white bulbs that have almost a taste of mint, fresh green apple, almost a strawberry taste. They're incredibly subtle. So I am showing through this, if you just move up just a little to the rooster, you can show the rooster close up in the, thanks, Pete. And maybe show them. Yes. So I have crafted a furnace in the belly of this cloisonne Chinese rooster, which is in fact an incense burner. But I've crafted a human-built furnace inside. And in fact, the rooster's wing is detachable. It's quite a brilliant piece. And on the other side here, you will see a dual vessel, a cylindrical one with creatures of the night. They are recognizable as bats, and also some very chimerical hybridized creatures. And a midnight starry sky over here. So that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
It is complete.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.
I think it turned out well.
Yeah. So given that, right, we see the fact that process and discovery, discovering things. We talked about the idea that, like, who was it you talked about? You were talking about the woman.
Oh, which one?
The woman you were talking about who was doing those big drawings.
Oh, you mean the porcelain?
No, before you were talking about the woman at the Mad place.
Oh yeah, the porcelain artist.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Her name is, I just put the notes there. Her name is Alice
Reel.
Reel.
Yeah, and we were talking about the
And she's
idea of the
French.
fact that like as these things kind of evolve, you start to kind of like fill them in and they kind of expand out. And then we're also talking about the Gothic drawings and how these things started out. And then as they evolved and as they expanded, they had to kind of be extended on papers. One of the things that's always been an interesting thing about one of the things they teach people when they learn to draft, when they do figure drawing or they do object drawing, is the fact that like make sure it fits on the page. Now that's good if you're just simply looking at and investigating the object as a kind of a thing, in an isolation.
I'll bring photos.
As we know and as we've learned, no thing exists in isolation. The idea of process philosophy, the idea of interconnectedness, the idea of art science complex, again, if we haven't made this clear, art science complex is a title because there isn't an understanding of the interconnectedness, the separation that we artificially have created between art and science exists until we get to the point where we evolve to the point where we no longer need to have these two things separate. I mean, they aren't separate. It's just that we perceive them as separate. Both things do what the same thing is, that they help us try to understand and deepen our knowledge of that which is the world of things, the world of things beyond us. So as that happens, we kind of get to the point where we like,
yeah,
oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Oh, that's nice.
This is Alice Reel, who is sitting on her giant drawing paper doing her drawing of the porcelain flowers. And this is her sculpting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, this is her sculpting the clay for the porcelain flowers.
Interesting. All right, cool.
And I can show the final, her specimens. And
what's that?
Oh, this was the inspiration for one of her porcelain pieces.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I will show
you. Well, that's cool. We don't want to kind of put too much into, but I think that idea that, you see the thing and you kind of start to get that sense of, as, White had talked about, the kind of naturalistic artist discovery in the of the elements of the aspects of something. So as that becomes the case, we start to kind of think of that idea of kind of like finding those things that start to give us kind of pause as to, hey, what is this which is of consequence? What is that may be of consequence? We start to kind of think about the fact that the principles that which were those things that kind of like were of the previous age or kind of until recently were valuable now have to be kind of like somewhat held in suspicion as this new time that's allowing us new opportunities basically will be more kind of geared towards the impulse and intuition of the great artists and scientists, rather than basically this idea where we have to take these forms and these principles and continue to apply them. I think there's always going to be the need for facility, but I think facility becomes that time when technique stops being generative. All right. Anyway. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, just showing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these things are kind of like basically just simply
just so
kind of
you
built
can
upon,
see.
but they could be endless.
Oh yeah.
Because what happens is they start to kind of
sections.
They kind of like iterations and tessellations, kind of like they could go on, kind of as kind of like either periodic or aperiodic kind of circumstances. That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it's worth seeing. It's hard for people to picture what these are.
I think one of the things that's really exciting right now is I think in the decorative arts and the fine arts and architecture and engineering, I think that there's a kind of potential that has been missing for a very long time. I think that, and this maybe we'll talk about a little bit next week, is the fact that there is that period by which things come, but then there are always circumstances that intervene that can sometimes be a distraction. We've talked in the past about some of those things and what they were. I think one of the things that I know and kind of experienced firsthand was the fact that because architecture as a vocation had a kind of a somewhat petty indifference towards its actual own benefits, it actually thwarted an organic impulse for almost 60 years.
Oh, that's
But at the
really
same time,
tragic,
we
yeah.
think about the fact that there were also previous times when, conflagrations and other things would kind of like stunt or even silence, voices of consequence. For me, one of the things that always seemed very highly personal in that regard was the work of Charles Rennie McIntosh,
Oh,
who
yeah. Oh,
who
actually,
basically just
it
unfortunately
should be like
happened
a
to be
three-parter.
yeah, it just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because that impulse that was growing through that organic impulse in the kind of art nouveau was kind of somewhat thwarted by the events of the First World War.
It was. I mean, he was actually arrested as a spy
As a
because
spy because he was
he was
drawing in the
actually
countryside.
drawing in the country. He
Yeah.
was keenly interested in flowers and in
Mhm.
botany. And if you've never seen Charles Rennie McIntosh's gorgeous, incredibly observed watercolor paintings,
Oh, they were beautiful.
they are
I mean,
gorgeous.
he
They are
actually had a
phenomenal.
very
Yeah.
he had a very kind of interesting style in which that
Mhm.
he started to kind of like organize the pieces, and they became very much architectural drawings. I think
Mhm.
that he not only was trying, I mean, he delineated these things with a certain kind of clarity that was kind of very unique, So anyway,
Oh, yes.
yeah, so
I would like to launch in a direction because we are very literature geared here at Art Science Complex.
I can read.
Yeah, I've seen you read. You're so cute when you read. I'd like to talk about a writer, a satirist, a humorist who died incredibly young of a heart attack at age 47 in London, which was tragic, tragic, because he invented language and techniques in linguistics and grammar and syntax that no one else has. The only closest thing I could say is to say some of Lewis Carroll's linguistic inventions, such as Jabberwocky, but he takes it a lot further, actually.
I think of James Joyce in the fact.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
I
oh,
think
yeah,
there are a
I
lot.
mean,
I
yeah,
think
you
that's
can say.
something in is that a lot of times you see people who start to kind of generate
Mhm.
from their own things. I think that's really technique is a generator as a result of the
Mhm.
fact that seeing the possibility of words, the possibility of
Mhm.
sounds, the possibility of forms
Mhm.
that previously had not really been seen as relevant or consequential now start to kind of generate those things of the new age.
Yes, I agree. I am talking about Jeffrey Willens, who, with Ronald Searle, who lived to a ripe old age, 91 or 92, but Jeffrey Willens, Willans, and that is Jeffrey with the G and two F's, was an English journalist and actually a former schoolmaster, which is actually really, really key. He created a character named Nigel Molesworth, who is right here as beautifully and hilariously penned by Searle. Why is this a perfect example? He is known for really not breaking rules. He was an incredibly whimsical writer, a typographer, and Nigel is known as the Curse of St. Custards, which is the school. And they collaborated across 4 hilarious books. My book here is the collection of all 4. The first appearance of Molesworth was in Punch in the magazine in 1939. It's twisted, it's wonky, it's surreal. The first book was Down with School, Skool, 1953. Words were all intentionally misspelled, but not at random. These were intentional, these were crafted misspellings in order to communicate far better the satire, the hilarity, and the irony of the situation of what it was like to be a British schoolboy in a private school, which was known as a public school, which wasn't really a public school, in the 1950s. Then it was How to Be Top, TOPP, 1954, and my favorite, Whiz for Atoms, WIZZ for ATOMMS, 1956. linguistics after his tragic early death at 47. Posthumously, his fourth book, Back in the Jug Again, 1959. So, how did Geoffrey Willens invent? What was the technique that I'd like to point out? He invented acrobatic lexicon that spanned these books, that was weird and consistently wonky. It was a satirical language of intentionally, as I said, misspelled words, invented words, and what I call a sardonic verbal hieroglyphics, meaning they're incredibly pictorial. Every misspelled word conjures a far broader image than the ordinary or quotidian word that we know. So these were linguistic innovations, and I would say it is language as character. And in these ways, I call his work deviant syntax, rogue grammar, typographical tomfoolery, and it was symbiotic experimental writing and graphic design and narrative techniques paired always with Ronald Searle's snide, dark, pointed, and highly deviant illustrations. But I don't want to, and I can only describe his punctuation as varmint punctuation. Yep. And for just one example, the title of chapter 7 of the first book is School Food, or the Piece of Cod Which Passeth Understanding. Now, I mean, that is hilarious. That's what I mean.
I think that there was a reason. I mean, I think things move towards a coalescence or an accretion. And I think there's a certain kind of impulse that we start to see. There is that interconnectedness between psychology and philosophy and natural science and all these kind of things that kind of bear upon each other, and that these things kind of share in terms of a kind of common impulse. But it's because of the circumstances that exist at a certain time. So there are conflagrations and obstacles, and sometimes things get subverted, but at the same time, those tragedies can sometimes become capable of kind of bringing the society forward. I think one of the things that, again, we talk about with Whitehead is the fact that one of the great discoveries of Western society was that necessity of the fundamental abstract nature of mathematics in order to kind of discover that interconnectedness. And through that discovery of interconnectedness, we were able to see that circumstance that gave rise to the century of genius. That through that interconnectedness of mathematics, we started to be able to understand that facility, right, and technique more importantly, could be related to rational means, so that we could see the fact that if something existed, there had to be an answer. So again, we've gone back to this idea of the unbreakable bonds, and we talked recently about criticism, but we also talked about the fact that there are certain things that give rise to certain advances that allow one culture or one tradition to advance where others may not necessarily do that. And I think in this case, that relationship between these two things, between technique and reason and rational based systems, has allowed us an efficiency and effectiveness that allowed us to kind of move very quickly, very, and very kind of deeply. So that is an advantage that we really should not sacrifice. And I think that's something that sometimes we kind of like, for our own envy or our kind of like jealousy or resentment, we need to appreciate the resilience and the genius of the societies from which come upon these incredible innovations. Anyway, as a result, I have to note the 250th birthday of this great nation that we live in, that has just passed within the last 3 hours.
Yes.
It's now 3:00 in the morning, and like midnight was basically the passing from the 4th to the 5th. But the opportunity that this nation has afforded to eccentric, iconoclastic individuals like ourselves to be able to kind of dream deeply and wildly and thoughtfully without repercussion, which is something that I've always kind of been very, very thankful for, and look forward to being able to continue that for as long as possible.
Hopefully more than another 250 years.
I'd love to see that, you know, but again, you know, that's something that I have to say, I am incredibly grateful for the fact that that opportunity has been presented to me in this great nation. Happy birthday, America.
Happy birthday, USA.
Yeah. Okay. So as we move into the final moments here, like, let's kind of like talk about where we're kind of going and what we're kind of like wrap this up, and kind of any, you know, kind of final thoughts.
Well, yes, I would like to. I can't get into it now, but I assume we're going to have to do a part 2.
Probably.
I have a lot of other notes.
Yeah.
It's also a very important topic because it spans classical music, it spans literature and satire.
All of culture.
Yeah, all of culture. Yeah. Science, mathematics, architecture, engineering, painting, drawing, you know. And so I would like to just say, and I'll only mention the actual words of what they invented. I have pages of notes about the specifics, but we don't have time now. And I'd very much like to do this in a part 2. I'll hang on to my notes. Paul Klee, one of my favorite painters ever, invented one technique after the other. He invented printmaking and transfer. He invented the oil tracing method. And as I said, I am simply naming them. I can tell you all about them in detail, but not right now. We don't have time. He invented a type of a monoprint. He also invented glass scratching way back in 1905, which gave his work this characteristic otherworldly magical luminosity. And his painting innovations were the grid system, the painted micromosaic, which is something no one was doing, abstract color theory back from his Tunisian trip in 1914, his translucent stratified fields of color, his glowing effects, which no one else was doing, his very unconventional, Paul Klee's very unconventional methods and materials, spraying and stamping, in drawing, his techniques and innovations, which he called taking a line for a walk, which I think is a beautiful way to put it. Paul Klee wrote voraciously about his work. He was very literate, very, very introspective, and had a great sense of humor, loved his food, didn't travel, just ate well. And his pictorial symbols, Klee invented a fully integrated graphic design system in his paintings with arrows and symbols and typography. So I will get more into that in the future. I will also talk about the inventions of Max Ernst, one of my favorite painters, a surrealist extraordinaire who invented all sorts of ways to use paint that nobody else had. I have notes on that. So yeah, I mean.
Also, I was looking for this piece in Whitehead where he talked about the fact that like something, you know, needs to be proven, but at the same time, something has to be worthy of that idea of being worth looking into it being proven. And I think it's like what he was saying today in kind of in the introduction to mathematics, is the fact that like certain things can be understood in terms of solving the problem, and solving the problem in order to kind of make the acquisition of the information is important. But it's also important to understand that the principles by which these abstractions have a consequence is that something that also has to be known. And those are the kind of things that we might want to kind of like start to think about and kind of ruminate on. So I think in that regard, you know, that's something that for me has become very much kind of important to me in my own work. And I think that two things that I've kind of understood. One is that concept of what I call lyrical drawing.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the fact that from the criticism episodes we had previously, I came to understand what I would call dramatic criticism and what I would call what's the other one was practical criticism.
Mhm.
And practical criticism is that idea that I've talked about where there's the observation and there's the skeptical judgment of the individual. So the critic passes an observation which has information and intent. The individual, basically artist, takes that information and can take or not take or discern or not discern the intent, because what's important is skeptically judging that which is basically kind of like presented. Now that's the practical critical process. The dramatic one is basically that idea of, what did we call it? The was it kind of like the unreliable critic.
The unreliable critic. That was
which
the
is
term I
based on
came
the
up with.
idea
Yeah.
of the unreliable narrator, where
Mhm.
the intent is very much in play, but it's not about basically the idea of the understanding. It's about the process itself as a kind of self-referential
Mhm.
thing. So anyway,
Oh, I'd like to leave
Yeah.
it with these final words, which I'll talk about in depth. Max Ernst manifested Freud's work in a huge way. It was the subconscious of the human mind being made visual and laid bare in frottage, grattage, and decalcomania. And I'll leave you with those three marvelous words, which are techniques that Max Ernst invented and used in his paintings to stupendous and towering effect.
interesting.
And that is a
Okay.
great way to
Good.
leave off
Good.
on a
Good.
cliffhanger.
Good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. So
Mhm.
basically next week, that's episode 85. It'll be the new era, things to come, and we'll basically be extending some of the ideas we've been talking about and kind of going into more detail in terms of that.
Mhm.
So that's kind of something we're going to do a part 2.
I
Maybe
think
even a
that we
part 3 of
should.
this.
This
But again,
really needs
one of the things I
part
think that's
2.
interesting is
Mhm.
a lot of these things that we speak about at other times in relation to different points of view.
Mhm.
And I think that's the kind of thing that allows us kind of to sometimes kind of give insights that were previously not kind of seen. So I think sometimes changing the language or presenting the idea gives a kind of fresh perspective,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
with that said, final thoughts, last words.
Last words is, when you want to conjure a scene of war, as Max Ernst did in World War II, nothing is more bone chilling, nothing is more unsettling psychologically than the visual that is unseen. But the unseen is present and is lurking just below the surface of Max Ernst canvases.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. So that's it for us for now. We apologize again for the delay because of the technical difficulties. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of get some of these things, or the world will
We'll
right
get
itself.
it sorted.
Yeah, it just seems as if like every time you turn around, something's
My
falling
inner
out of the
key
sky.
broke off in the door. So
There
yeah.
you go. There you go. No, so this is like
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks have just been
It's been
absolutely
quite
like
something.
it almost feels as if like somebody pranking us. The thing in Amalek where she kind of like does all those things to that guy.
One of our favorite
it's a
films
beautiful
ever.
When
yeah.
I think there was like
Yes.
did somebody come in the middle of the night and like
prank us.
and like kind of like saw my key or some of
just,
these things like
just
yeah,
so it would
yeah,
break off
right,
in the lock.
exactly.
Anyway.
So
Okay.
the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's real, and it's to the benefit of us all to keep it just that way.
Precisely Molesworth.
And after 250 years, stay free. Continue to stay free.